A king is eating poison on purpose, not by accident and not under duress. He is convinced it is the only way to stay alive. But the strange medicine he created to protect himself would become far more important than the king himself. For nearly 2,000 years, physicians prescribed versions of it for almost everything: poisoning, snakebite, fever, pain, stomach illness, grief, and plague. One medicine, made from dozens of ingredients, was expected to protect the body against nearly any threat. It was called Theriac. At the height of its influence, governments regulated its production, apothecaries prepared it in public ceremonies, and cities competed to sell the most trusted version. Emperors took it, physicians defended it, patients relied on it through some of the deadliest epidemics in human history. Most of its claims were false. Theriac could not cure plague, it could not neutralize every poison, and it could not protect the body from almost every disease. But it was not entirely useless either. Many versions contained opium and other active ingredients that could relieve pain, quiet coughing, slow diarrhea, and make desperately ill patients feel noticeably better. That was the problem. Theriac did just enough to make its much larger claims seem believable. The story begins in the 2nd century BCE with Mithridates VI, a king who believed that anyone close to his throne might be preparing to poison him. His father may already have been murdered that way. Members of his own family had reasons to want him dead, and every servant, advisor, and dinner guest represented a possible threat. His response was not to surround himself with more guards or taste testers, it was to make himself impossible to kill. According to ancient writers, Mithridates began studying toxic plants, collecting antidotes, and exposing himself to small quantities of poison. Eventually, experimenting with different formulations and testing them on condemned prisoners, he was said to have spent years compounding existing antidotes into a single preparation. One formula meant to protect him against almost anything his enemies could use. Ancient sources say that as his kingdom collapsed after the final defeat in the Third Mithridatic War, Mithridates poisoned his own daughters to prevent them from being captured by Rome. Then he tried to poison himself. The poison failed. He then asked his bodyguard Bituitus to kill him with a sword. The king died. His medicine did not. What began as one ruler's defense against assassination slowly became the most famous universal medicine in the world. The question is not simply why people believed in it. The real question is why, after centuries of failure, they continued to experience enough evidence to believe they were right. After Mithridates was defeated, the Roman general Pompey reportedly took possession of his writings on poisons and antidotes. Pliny the Elder records what Pompey's soldiers found in one notebook written in Mithridates' own hand: a recipe made from 2 dried walnuts, 2 figs, and 20 leaves of rue, pounded together with a pinch of salt. This particular antidote contained no viper flesh, no exotic poisons, and nothing resembling the dozens of ingredients that would later become attached to Mithridates' name. What mattered most was not any single recipe. It was the idea that one formula could oppose many different poisons, and that idea would do far more work over the next 2,000 years than anything Mithridates actually wrote down. By the 1st century CE, the Roman medical writer Celsus recorded a version of Mithridates' antidote containing more than 30 ingredients, most of them plants, spices, resins, and seeds mixed with honey. By then, it was already more than an emergency treatment. A smaller amount could be taken regularly as protection, while larger doses were recommended when poisoning or illness was suspected. That change matters because the medicine was no longer being used only after a snake bite or an assassination attempt. It was becoming a form of preventive medicine taken by healthy people to stop danger before it appeared. Once a medicine is believed to defend the entire body from poison, the definition of poison can begin to expand. Disease could be imagined as a kind of internal corruption: fever, plague, and anything else that weakened the body could all be understood as though some harmful substance had entered it. The antidote was slowly becoming a universal cure. During the 1st century CE, the physician Andromachus developed a more elaborate version for the Roman Emperor Nero. The new formula contained dozens of ingredients, and its most famous addition was the flesh of vipers. The reasoning was wrong, but it was not random. A viper carries venom without dying from it. Some physicians therefore reasoned that something inside the animal might resist the poison. If that protective quality could be transferred into medicine, perhaps the patient could share the same resistance. The viper flesh was cooked, dried, and added to the mixture alongside herbs, spices, resins, wine, honey, and opium. Andromachus's formula became known as Theriac. The name came from a Greek word associated with wild or venomous animals, but its purpose quickly stretched far beyond animal bites. A century later, Galen, the most influential physician of the Roman world, wrote extensively about Theriac and prepared versions for the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who reportedly took the medicine regularly. That association gave Theriac something more powerful than any individual ingredient. It gave the medicine authority. It was no longer merely an old antidote connected to a defeated foreign king. It had become imperial medicine. It had been refined by respected physicians, consumed by emperors, and absorbed into the medical system that would dominate Europe and much of the Mediterranean world for centuries. As Galen's authority grew, the authority of the medicines attached to his name grew with it. Theriac traveled through manuscripts, trade networks, and medical schools. Its ingredients changed, but its reputation did not. By the Middle Ages, Theriac was no longer a single stable recipe. Different cities and physicians substituted local ingredients, removed substances that had become difficult to obtain, and added others thought to strengthen the formulas. Some recipes contained more than 60 ingredients, while others contained far more. The mixture could include opium, myrrh, saffron, cinnamon, pepper, frankincense, wine, honey, and dried plants gathered across Europe, North Africa, and Asia. Some versions also still included viper flesh. The preparation could take weeks or months, and some authorities insisted that the finished mixture then had to age before reaching its full strength. This made Theriac expensive, but it also made the medicine difficult to challenge. If a patient failed to improve, defenders could blame the ingredients. Perhaps one plant had been harvested in the wrong season, the opium was weak, a substitute had been used, the mixture had not aged long enough, or the apothecary had prepared it incorrectly. The number of ingredients created an almost limitless number of explanations for failure. The formula itself was protected because the formula was never quite the same twice. No city understood that better than Venice. By the later Middle Ages and Renaissance, Venice had become Europe's most famous producer of Theriac. The city was perfectly placed for this trade because Venetian merchants had access to spices, plants, and resins arriving from across the Mediterranean and beyond. Venice, however, was not merely selling a medicine, it was selling trust. Officials inspected the ingredients, and apothecaries displayed rare substances before they were mixed. During famous public preparations, workers ground the ingredients in large mortars, while physicians, officials, and spectators watched. The performance served a practical purpose because buyers needed to believe that the ingredients were genuine and that nothing expensive had been replaced with a cheaper substitute. It also transformed pharmaceutical production into a public ceremony. This was not a secret folk remedy passed quietly between villagers. It was inspected by authorities, prepared under public observation, and exported under the reputation of one of Europe's richest cities. In England, it became known as Venice treacle. Other cities produced competing versions, but the Venetian product became a standard against which the others were judged. Theriac was now more than medicine, it was an international brand. Then came the disease that would kill 1 in 3 people on the continent. And Theriac was one of the few solutions medicine could offer. In 1347, the plague reached Europe. Over the following years, the Black Death killed an enormous proportion of the population. Families disappeared, settlements were abandoned, and physicians died beside the people they were trying to treat. No one understood the bacterium responsible, no one understood the role of fleas, and no one possessed an effective treatment capable of stopping the infection. Physicians did, however, possess Theriac. Medical authorities recommended it as protection. Some advised taking it regularly before symptoms appeared, while others gave it to people who were already ill. Theriac was not a fringe response to the plague, it was established medicine. Its reputation made it a logical choice. If the plague was understood as a poison invading or corrupting the body, then the most famous antidote in the world appeared to be exactly what was needed. Some physicians reported apparent successes. When a patient took Theriac and recovered, the medicine received the credit. When another patient died, the disease was judged to have been too powerful, the dose too late, or the preparation defective. Once again, every outcome could be made to fit the theory. The plague exposed a problem that Theriac could not solve. The medicine could not eliminate the infection, stop the disease from spreading through the body, or transform a universal antidote into a cure for the plague. That does not mean, however, that patients felt nothing. Many versions of Theriac contained opium. A patient burning with fever could take the medicine and feel their pain ease, their coughing quiet, their digestive system slow, and their anxiety fade. Eventually, the patient might sleep. For the first time in days, they could feel that something had changed, and they would be right. Something had changed. The patient had not been cured, but they had experienced a real pharmacological effect. That distinction is the reason Theriac became so difficult to disprove. Opium can relieve pain, suppress coughing, slow the digestive system, reduce diarrhea, and sedate a frightened, exhausted patient. Those effects were real in ancient Rome, real during the Black Death, and remain real today. Physicians did not understand opioid receptors or the chemistry of morphine, but they could observe what happened after a patient swallowed the medicine. The person became calmer, the pain diminished, the coughing stopped, and sometimes the patient recovered. From the physician's perspective, the conclusion was reasonable. The medicine appeared to have worked. The mistake was not believing that the patient had experienced relief. The mistake was treating that relief as proof of every claim attached to the formula. A patient with plague who sleeps after taking opium has not been cured of plague. A patient whose pain decreases has not necessarily recovered from the disease causing the pain. Symptoms can improve while the underlying illness continues. Without controlled comparisons, reliable diagnosis, or a way to isolate individual ingredients, those differences were extraordinarily difficult to see. If a patient took Theriac and survived, the medicine appeared to have saved them. If the patient took it and died, the disease had defeated even the strongest available remedy. If the patient felt immediate relief before either outcome, that experience strengthened belief in the entire compound. Other failed treatments survived because every bad outcome could be explained away. Bloodletting endured in part because physicians could always blame the disease, the timing, or the amount of blood removed. Theriac was harder to disprove for a different reason. Patients often experience a real effect. The opium content varied considerably across recipes and regions, which meant some preparations were genuinely sedating, and others were barely active. But physicians had no way to measure the difference. A dose that worked in Venice might do almost nothing when made from weaker ingredients in a different city. That variability made the medicine's failures easier to explain away, and its apparent successes harder to question. The mistake was assuming that one genuine effect validated every other claim attached to the medicine. Opium is the clearest explanation for many of Theriac's immediate effects. Other ingredients may also have affected the body because historical formulas contain dozens of biologically active plants and substances. Detecting activity in an individual ingredient, however, is not the same as proving that the complete medicine worked. The dose matters, the preparation matters, and the way the drug enters the body matters. An ingredient that affects inflammation or digestion does not automatically become an antidote for venom, a preventive medicine, or a cure for plague. In 2021, French researchers published a chemical analysis of the dried contents of a 19th century porcelain jar donated to France's National Order of Pharmacists and believed to contain theriac. They detected a complex mixture consistent with ingredients recorded in historical pharmacy formulas. The finding answered one question directly. Apothecaries really were preparing elaborate compounds resembling the recipes preserved in their books. But chemical complexity is not clinical effectiveness. Finding hundreds of molecules inside an old medicine does not prove that it cured the illnesses written on its label. Theriac was a genuine pharmaceutical preparation containing genuinely active substances. Its central problem was that no one could determine which part did what. By the 18th century, medicine was beginning to change. Physicians were becoming more willing to question inherited authority, chemists were trying to identify individual substances, and medical writers increasingly demanded that treatments justify their claims. In 1745, the English physician William Heberden published an essay called Anti-Theriaca. Heberden examined Mithridates and Theriac not as sacred inheritances from antiquity, but as medicines whose ingredients and claims had to make sense. He asked why so many substances were being combined, why those particular quantities had been chosen, and why dozens of competing ingredients should become more effective simply because they had been mixed together. He also asked a more dangerous question. If opium was responsible for the relief patients experienced, what purpose did the rest of the formula serve? Heberden was especially concerned about hiding a powerful drug, like opium, inside an enormous compound whose strength could vary from batch to batch. His criticism did not cause theriac to disappear overnight. The London Pharmacopoeia still included theriac and Mithridates in its 1746 edition, which would be their final appearance there. That detail matters because even after a respected physician had dismantled the logic of the medicine, established custom was still powerful enough to preserve it. Elsewhere, versions survived much longer. Theriac remained in German and French pharmaceutical references into the 19th century. A medicine that had survived Rome, medieval plague, and the rise of European pharmacy did not collapse because of one essay. It faded as medicine learned to separate mixtures into individual substances and ask more precise questions. Physicians could now ask what a specific ingredient did at what dose, for which condition, and compared with what alternative. Once opium could be treated as opium, there was less reason to bury it inside a paste containing dozens of unrelated substances. Once a drug had to demonstrate a specific effect against a specific illness, a medicine claiming to treat almost everything became almost impossible to defend. Theriac had survived because its claims were broad. Modern medicine defeated it by making the questions narrow. Theriac was not simply a fraud, but it was not secretly a universal cure either. It was a medicine, built on a false theory and burdened with impossible claims, yet it contained ingredients powerful enough to make patients feel that it worked. Some physicians began with a complete theory and followed it into harmful treatments. Other healers discovered effective techniques through observation, even when they could not explain why those techniques worked. Theriac occupied the space between them. The theory was wrong, parts of the medicine were active, and no one had a reliable method for separating one from the other. The patients were not fools. They felt a real effect and reasonably trusted the substance that produced it. The physicians were not necessarily frauds. They prescribed a respected medicine, observed patients improve, and inherited centuries of testimony telling them that the formula worked. What neither could do without controlled comparisons was distinguish a drug that made dying more comfortable from one that stopped the disease causing the death. That was Theriac's real power. It came not from curing everything, but from doing just enough to make the truth extraordinarily difficult to separate from the belief. Not because the medicine worked, but because nobody had a way to prove it didn't.